Welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is the Question Guy podcast. I'm here with CJ. Actually, her name is Carolyn Jones, but she goes by CJ. She's going to give us some insight as to why that is. But before we get into this conversation, this is going to be a story that every listener needs to really tune in because CJ is going to talk about years of resentment and how she overcame that and then how she found her purpose as a result. CJ, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much, Keith. I can't thank you enough for having me on.
Oh, this is going to be a fun and exciting conversation. But before we get to the fun part, we got to get to the not so fun part. So, man, years of resentment. And I think in the pre call, you said 30 years is a long time to be resentful. Can you give us some insights as to what was going on in your life?
Yes. I started life in a very chaotic and dysfunctional environment and was called worthless a lot, like 3 times a week, fat, stupid, and ugly. I got a 4 point when I took all my heavy duty topics at my nursing school. And my father's response was, well, that school is for stupid people.
Oh my goodness. So daddy was never nice to you, is what I'm understanding.
Not often.
Oh.
I was not one of his favorites, let me put it that way. So I had a big resentment about that. A big
Your
resentment.
your whole life, growing up with dad, pretty bad?
Not all of it, no.
Okay.
We did camping trips and I played a musical instrument. My parents got me started on the violin, which I played for 50 years.
That is so cool. But
Yeah,
but you said a lot of your younger years was, not so hot.
right,
Dad talked down to
right.
you, called you names, and growing up, that could not have been fun.
It wasn't. It really affected my self esteem and my confidence.
As it should, as it totally should. And did you carry that into adulthood in any way?
Yes, I did. I carried it all into adulthood.
Talk to us about that.
For 30 years, I was resentful over my upbringing
Mm,
and I drank over it.
mm.
So every time I thought of a difficulty I was having, I blamed it on my past and I would chug up.
I can imagine it's easy to medicate ourselves just to feel good, but that probably didn't solve any of your problems.
It didn't. And in fact, it put fire to all my problems, it set them on fire.
Mm.
So I was pretty much a mess. I was married for 20 years of those 30, and it was an alcoholic marriage.
Both you and your husband?
Me and my husband,
Okay.
yes,
So you went from not so good, and I think you made it worse somehow.
maybe so.
So what happened in your
Maybe
marriage?
so. My marriage wasn't right from the beginning.
Okay.
Our first date was looking for a half gram of cocaine.
Okay. Well, that
That
kind of sets the tone a lot.
Yes, yes.
But you decided to marry him.
I know because I thought he would change.
Okay. And did he?
No,
Did you?
not then.
Okay.
Not yet.
So what was going on in your marriage?
A lot of verbal abuse, no physical abuse like with childhood, but there was a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of put downs. I used to be a varnisher of teak wood trim on boats. And we were on a boat and we had a landing where you would step onto the boat. And then on the other side of that landing was the seat, which is where you would naturally step. and the landing was only about that wide. Well, I varnished it, and my husband continually walked on it,
Mm.
even though I asked him to not do that. He totally disregarded me. He would praise me in front of other people, and then when we got home, he would cut me down for what I was doing. So it was crazy making.
But that's years of resentment being built up, years of it. And I think you said at least 30, probably if not longer. That's got to tear you apart inside. What's going on inside of you?
It did. It did. To back up very quickly, when I was a child, I kept a smile on my face.
Okay.
So everything was fine. If I didn't do that, I got punished. So when I grew up and I had those same feelings, that's when I drank.
Mhm.
We got into horrible fights when I drank,
Mm.
when he drank, when we drank.
So with all that, what happens as a result of your marriage? I mean, did it explode? Did it implode? I'm assuming that you're no longer with him.
That is correct. I've been gone for 23 years.
Okay. So how did that all end? How did that end? Like, what was the final, final straw for you to
Final
say, I'm
straw.
done? Yeah.
Well, as I said, we were living on our boat in a marina.
Okay.
One of the guys, a dock mate, had someone commit suicide on his boat, and a mutual friend of ours was very concerned about him. And because I worked out of my office on the boat, I was around the marina all day. So he asked me to check in on him, which I did. Well, I found that we had a lot to talk about. He was very open, very sensitive, totally unlike my husband. I grew to love him. I felt he was the love of my life. So one day I calmly told my husband I was leaving,
Okay.
and the calm left immediately.
I, I, wow. Okay. Well, that's pretty shocking.
Yes.
How does that actually work though? I mean, did he get angry?
Oh, he got very angry and then he got really upset. Why don't we go to a marriage counselor? It's like, no, I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done. Because I knew that this other guy and I were to be. We were
Okay.
meant to be. Well, that night, my husband threw me off the boat, and I didn't have any money and I didn't have any place to stay. So I stayed in my storage unit for a couple days. That was interesting.
Wait a second. The storage unit doesn't have a bathroom or shower or anything. I'm
Right,
assuming. So how did
right.
you
So
survive? How did you survive that?
I had to scrounge local shops like gas stations, other shops, 7-Eleven.
So give us a frame of reference. At this moment in your life, just, your husband threw you out, you're on your own, no money. How old are you at this point?
29 or 30.
Okay. So about 30 years old, you're on your own. What happens? Because you said there was a love of your life. Now, where is he at?
He's still at the marina.
Okay.
I find an apartment to live in. I move in and come back to the marina frequently to visit, and visited with the love of my life. My husband was off working during the day, so I knew I was safe to
Okay.
come back and not run into him.
And
Well, one day, the love of my life said to me, I don't like you any more than anyone else. I'm just being kind to you.
oh, CJ, your story is not going well at all. It's got to get better at some point.
It
Tell me
will.
when this.
It gets better real soon here, Keith.
Okay, because my heart's about broken now at this point.
Oh, well, mine was broken. Shattered is more like it.
Okay.
I handled it by drinking and crying for 2 months
Okay.
without eating anything. until I realized I was killing myself.
And you probably were in a very slow manner.
Yes, I was. The pain in my side where my liver is was excruciating.
Okay. Did you see a
So
doctor?
no, no.
Okay.
One night I was so beside myself. And after I realized that I was dying, I went out onto the deck of the boat and I threw my hands up to the heavens and I said, if there's a God there, please help me. I can't do this anymore. Within a
And
month, I was traveling to San Diego from Sausalito to live with my former bartender who was getting sober herself.
okay, because I'm about to say that doesn't sound like a good answer from God.
Right, right. Well, it was the best answer it could have been. You know, I went for a couple weeks to get a handle on my drinking, and I spent a year and a half there getting sober.
Cool.
I went to 4 and 5 meetings a day because that's what I needed. I was dealing with immense grief over the unrequited love and rage over my upbringing.
Mm.
I
So
walked
go ahead. Go ahead.
I walked a lot, I read a lot, and I journaled a lot, a very lot. Like 3 hours a day, I'd journal. And gradually things got better. At 4 years sober, I discovered a way to forgive my past. Oh, Keith, the feelings of peace and freedom that I felt were immediate and immense. I was in seventh heaven.
Well,
I had finally found that peace that I was looking for.
but you didn't tell us how you did that. I mean, how did that happen? How does that happen? How did that happen for you?
Well, one day I was doing a self appraisal, I call it, where I was looking at myself and the things that I had done in my life while I was drinking. And one of the things I realized was I used to get drunk and yell and scream at whatever guy I happened to be with that they were worthless and would never amount to anything.
Hmm. I
I
remember
was,
you saying that about you, somebody was saying that about you at one point.
yes, my
Yeah.
father.
Yeah.
So I was mortified that I had said that to these guys, and thank goodness they've all forgiven me for it. They knew that I was deeply troubled. Thank God that they understood that.
So there was an evolution or a revolution going on inside of you that said life can be different somehow. Yes?
Yes. Well, when I realized that I was saying that the person was worthless, I didn't mean it about them. I meant it about myself.
Okay.
When I realized that, I had a huge aha moment.
Mm.
And that moment was if all those years my father called me worthless and said I would amount to nothing, and he meant it about me, he didn't really mean it about me, he meant it about himself.
Mhm.
In that instant, I saw him as a fellow human being who was wounded just like me.
Yep.
I had compassion for him because I knew what the wounded wound, the worthless wound, felt like.
Hmm.
For a year, I went back and forth between anger. The rage had mellowed out to anger at this point,
Okay.
and I went back and forth between compassion and anger for a year until one day I noticed I had forgiven them.
How did you do that? That's difficult. To forgive somebody is difficult.
It was a it was purely divine. I think what happened was by having compassion for him and my mom, I opened a space in my heart and forgiveness flowed in to take that place. to fill that space.
I like that. But that was the starting point of a evolution that you've now gone through. You've made some significant changes in your own life since that point.
Very much so.
Can you talk about it?
Yes. I became a photographer. Well, I was a photographer, but I started doing it for a living. And I didn't make anything with it. I mean, I sold things here and there. I also started photographing these old iron gates. This is in March of 2004.
Oh
I
my.
started photographing these old gates, and I loved them. And I would walk the streets for hours every day. I have 900 slides of gates.
You have 900 pictures of people's gates?
Of gates, yes.
What in the world? What did you do with 900 pictures of gates? Tell me.
They're stored in a slide protector sheet
Okay.
inside my notebook, and that notebook is in my to-go bag if I ever have to exit the house quickly.
But you did something really special with these pictures. At least you're starting to. And one of those
Yeah.
things is actually published.
Yes.
Can you show
Yeah.
us?
It came to be Opening the Gates of the Heart.
Awesome.
This is the second edition, Images That Heal and the Stories Behind Them. The first edition was called A Journey of Healing.
Okay.
The
Tell me.
thing that's so cool here, here's a good one. This is Invitation of Dialogue.
We see it. What do you like about that?
Wait a minute, let me read the verse.
Okay.
If we as individuals cannot speak to each other, how then can we as nations achieve peace?
Is that something that came to you as a result of the picture? Like, how did you get that idea from the picture?
3/4 of the verses in this book, and there's 43 of them, were actually written in my journals. All the journaling I did,
Yeah.
that's where those verses came from, verbatim.
Cool.
They matched up with a characteristic of a gate, and so I paired them together.
So when you were kind of growing, maturing, and healing from your alcoholism, from drinking, this is what you wrote down. And then
Yes,
now everything seems to be coming together because you're taking these pictures. These pictures have real meaning to you, and you can now correlate that meaning with something that's part of you.
yes,
Yeah. How
yes.
did that how did that help you heal even more?
Well, we're missing one big picture
Give it to me.
in this story, and that is that I took the gates in actually February and March of 2004.
Okay.
And over here, I'm titling them so that I can frame them and sell them to galleries. Over here, I'm just journaling to keep myself sober.
Okay.
Well, in November of 2004, I wrote in my journal, I have spent a lifetime spinning webs of terror and shame between the spires that stand as sentinels to my heart.
Wow.
And that described this photo that I had named Webs of Fear.
Oh wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Do
And
you
so,
can I ask you a question though?
yeah,
Do you remember where these gates are like in real life? Where are they? Like where are they?
some are in Belvedere, California. One is in Taos, New Mexico. One is in Colorado backcountry.
So you've been to all these places.
Yes.
How did you accomplish that? How did you accomplish getting it to all these places? This is really when you were a photographer?
No, it was before that. After I graduated from college, from Kent, I went to Kent State.
Okay.
And something interesting is I went to Kent State the September after the kids were killed in May.
Okay. All right. I got it.
So the campus was a police campus. There were tanks rolling. I was terrified and I called every night to ask to come home and was told, no, you made a commitment, you stay.
Wow.
Well, I decided to see what all the hoopla was about. So the long and the short of it is I became a protester of the Vietnam War.
Wow. Well, that could be a story all on its own. But
Yes,
in
yes.
all of
So
that,
we'll put
you
that aside now.
we
Well,
please.
my senior year of college, my fiance sent me a Valentine. I was going to Kent State. He was going to Ohio State. There's like a 2 hour ride between the two of them. Only what he sent was not a Valentine. It was a note saying he'd married someone else.
Well, that's more heartbreak. I want to get to the good part. I want to get to the part where
Okay.
you're healing and these books that you're printing, these pictures and you're journaling all come together and create the CJ that I'm talking to right now. The power. Where's the power?
Yes. Okay, I'm almost there.
Okay. Take me to the next step.
The next step is where was I before on the previous step?
You told us about the books. I asked about the books. You showed us the picture. You combined them with the journaling. That's where you're getting those little mantras from. What's next?
Before I fell on the floor when I wrote those words that I recited in my journal because I knew right away it described this Webs of Fear I had just titled. It was at that point that I realized I had a book in the making. So I like to believe that it was divinely created. That became my, what's the word? Kick in the butt, so to speak, to start believing and having faith
I love it. And it
in the
worked.
divine. Yes,
And it worked.
everything changed. After that is when I learned to forgive. That was at 4 years sober. At 7 years sober, I learned how to be grateful. That was in response to answering 3 questions that I found in a book by Fred Luskin, who's a PhD psychologist who's world renowned for his forgiveness work. Those questions are about you take a resentment or grief or whatever it is, and you ask these 3 questions. What is the lesson I learned? What is the positive that happened because of this experience?
Mhm.
And what can I be grateful for?
Wow. Good questions.
Very good questions. Well, right off the bat, I did it over my grief for the unrequited love.
Right.
And right off the bat, I realized that I had 5 things that were positives that occurred, and they are my gratitudes. And they are the rejection pried me out of a dysfunctional marriage, got me sober, led me to forgiveness, allowed me to forgive my parents, led me to the forgiveness work I do today because I'm a forgiveness coach, and allowed me to write my gold medal winning book, The Art of Forgiveness, A Promise of Peace.
Beautiful. What's
Yes.
inside that book?
Oh, let me just turn to. It's interesting that God, a force and presence I had long ago abandoned because I believed he abandoned me in my early years, showed up now in my life. It was the book Conversations with God, an Uncommon Dialogue by Neil Donald Walsh that began to wake me up. In it, he spoke and speaks of how God is in everything and everyone, in all situations and events, available through all mediums. Having read this book just before becoming sober, I came to sobriety alert and searching for God in people, in events, in literally everything. I began to hear messages in songs and to see them on billboards. I heard and saw things like "Carry On" and "You're on the right track." So that's just I just opened the book and I read what popped up. That's an example. I do want to find one thing if I can find it.
What are you
Here
looking
it is.
for?
Now, remember, I told you how upset I was through the unrequited love. I was shattered, all that in grief. Although the unrequited love situation created the worst months and years of my lifetime, currently life has evolved into the deepest joy, peace, gratitude, and positivity I've ever known, let alone knew existed. Initially, I gained a feeling of peace and freedom when I discovered how to forgive my past at 4 years sober. And then I went on and told you about the gratitude. But the point I wanted to make was what life has evolved into. I live in a state of gratitude and positivity, and I'm at peace and free from resentment. After 30 years of being resentful, that's pretty darn good if you ask me.
Actually, it's a lot darn good.
Thank you.
It
Thank
certainly
you.
is. And so from all that, you said that you're a coach, a grief coach. What kind of coach?
A forgiveness coach.
How does that work exactly? Just briefly, I'm curious.
Well, first of all, I developed the Yippee method of healing. Yippee, and I named it that so you could go, Yippee, I'm going to find peace and freedom.
How does it work?
Yip,
Give me some.
Yippee is an acronym. It stands for yearn, investigate, process, practice, evolve, and empower. So we start by looking at awareness, and then we look at willingness, your willingness to forgive, your willingness to consider forgiveness. And then we look at letting go, acceptance, gratitude.
Hmm.
Then we get into processing and we process why we are resentful. Once we've done that, we practice these things. We evolve when we do a self appraisal in the evolve stage. And the self appraisal is really pretty slick. It starts with this. It's you write a list, and it is all the three positive, three kind and loving things you did for another person in the last week.
Hmm. Like,
And then you do it for yourself. What are three kind and loving things I did for myself in the past week? Then you celebrate that because that's who you are at your very core. You are a kind and loving person. That's who you were meant to be. And underneath everything that has gone on, that's who you really are. When you've got that down really well and you feel solid in it, then we move to the second part, which is write down three unkind, unloving, and maybe mean things you said to someone else in the last week, and then do it about yourself.
mhm.
Embarrassing things come up, and I started to get humiliated for some of the things that I had done and said. And then I began to look with curiosity. Wow, look what I did. I didn't really mean that. I wonder why I did that. And so I researched why I did it. I discovered the point in my life at which that behavior originated, and I went back momentarily to that point and gave myself love and gratitude and came back to the present. And it helped to heal those areas of hurt that I hurt someone else over.
Uh,
You see, hurt people, usually in the same ways that they were hurt. So that's why hurts and resentments get passed along generation to generation.
yeah. CJ, I
Yes,
love the fact that you found hope, you found help, and you found a way to grow. And so there's no better way to end this conversation than to know that because you took the journey, you're helping others to take the journey as well. I want to
yes.
thank you for being on this call and this conversation with me. And I do appreciate your time. And for those of you who are watching and listening, this has been another edition of the Question Guy podcast. And I'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.